I am Adriana Sosa, a board member of the World YWCA, and I am coming to you today from Haiti. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this exciting session and fourth edition of the Bullet and Dove panel hosted by the World YWCA. Today, we will be highlighting the impact of conflict on women's health and well-being, and we are grateful to the Christian Aid for their support in making this webinar possible. Some of you are joining us through Zoom, and many more are joining on the broadcast on Facebook. So to each and every one of you, a warm welcome and thank you for being here with us today. Today, we will be hearing more from the life experiences and context of our amazing panelists who have experience in peace building in conflict regions. Please feel free to use the chat box in Zoom and comments on Facebook to send your greetings and let us know from where in the world you're joining. As the event is running, we welcome your questions on both Zoom and Facebook, and we will try our absolute best to respond to them as time allows. Kindly note that this panel will be conducted in English, but of course, for those of you joining in Zoom, there will be translations available in Spanish and French. And so whenever you need to access these interpretations, all you have to do is click on the language you would like to hear in the interpretation icon on the bottom of your screen. And if you're joining in from your phone, you will have that option when you click on more. I think Talisa will also be putting some instructions in the chat box on how to access interpretation. And if you do understand English, you're welcome to keep your interpretation off. So this event might be for an hour and a half. And before we start, allow me to share with all of you a few housekeeping announcements to consider as we carry on with the panel. Please note that this session is being done on Zoom and Facebook. Excuse me. Please note that this session is part of the Bullet and Dove initiative of the World YWCA, where through the Bullet and Dove panels, we're creating platforms for sharing of authentic voices and stories by leaders on the ground. Because this is being done on Zoom and Facebook Live, by joining this session, if you choose to speak, this means that you consent to your audio and image being broadcast. And by participating in the panel, you also have agreed to behave professionally, respectfully, and be culturally sensitive towards other people to promote the principles of respect, diversity, and inclusion, as well as to actively prevent and not engage in abusive behavior of any kind that leads to any harm, prejudice, discrimination, or harassment against any person. We encourage viewers to adhere to these principles and be respectful to everyone and sensitive to their cultural realities, experience, and expression. We recognize that freedom of expression for anyone is important, but we emphasize these principles to treat all other people with dignity and respect at all times. If you do not adhere to these principles, you will be removed from the panel, as World YWCA does not accept abusive behavior of any kind. Okay, so now that we have gotten all of that out of the way, please grab yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and get comfortable as we start this panel. So as you may know, the World YWCA stands in solidarity and is committed to the UNSCR 1325. We know that war, conflict, and violence impact women, young women, and girls differently. In times of conflict and instability, there is a severe risk of sexual violence, abuse, displacement, increased poverty, and trauma. For girls, young women, and women, issues and realities of gender inequality, disproportionate negative health outcomes, injustice, and limited education access are exacerbated. Despite not being the instigators of war, women suffer the worst consequences. And disturbingly, by the end of 2018, a staggering at least 21 million women and girls had been forcibly displaced within their own countries due to the ravages of conflict and violence. This displacement disrupts their lives, subjects them to heightened risks, and burdens their well-being immensely. The active participation of women and young women in conflict resolution is key to relevant action and the effective implementation of peace processes. Women are vital to peace building that is not just inclusive and effective, but sustainable and long-lasting. In light of these critical events, I am honored to welcome our esteemed panelists, Lani, Dihab, Emma, and Sophia, They will explore further the profound impact of conflict on women's health and well-being. So now I want to open the floor to our panelists so they may introduce themselves and also shed some light on the unique health challenges women face in each of their regions. Lonnie, will you please open the panel for us? Introduce yourself. And as the first question, could you tell us a bit about the gang violence and human trafficking happening in Latin America and the unique challenges women face as a result of that violence?
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you to YWCA for the invitation to this panel. Yeah, my name is Lani Anaya Jimenez. I am from Mexico. I'm currently based in Sweden, and I work for two organizations, especially with the Latin American context, with Act Church of Sweden as program manager in Central America, and with the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. And throughout these works, I think that the main challenge especially in Latin America and the Caribbean, is, as you mentioned, the violence exercised by drugs, but also some of our governments are practicing this systematic violence against women. So that impacts on sexual and reproductive rights. It has a huge impact on how, I would say it's both a physical, but it's also a cultural violence. So it happens a lot that women are affected on their health emotionally because we are told that we are not capable, or among this violence of systematic war with drugs or militarization, that we are seen mostly as victims. So it's a re-victimization that as well happens. It also, we have a lot of cases in our region about sexual and gender-based violence. So most of these drug groups and even military groups exercise violence against women in terms of sexual violence, such as rapes, disappearances. So it is a huge umbrella of different sorts of violence. So you can understand that women face health issues, both physical, but it's also emotional, it's psychological, and all these get together, and that's why also in feminists we talk about intersectionality, because it depends also where you are coming from, if you are from an indigenous group or not, if you are in a rural area or an urban area, then that affects differently. But I wouldn't categorize only one sort of effect. Well, it not affects only in one term the health issues, but it's a vast umbrella of different circumstances based on the types of violence we face in Latin America.
Thank you so much, Lonnie, for sharing this insightful information and shedding some light on the intricacies of the consequence of violence on women. And I like that you mentioned intersectionality. I think that's a very critical point, especially here in this subject and in this context. And I look forward to diving deeper into this in our next question. But for now, I'm going to turn the mic to Dihab. Dihab, please introduce yourself. And we know that Ethiopia has a prevalence of child marriages, with many of them being reported in regions of conflict, such as Tigray. Could you give us some context on this and share about other health challenges that women may face there?
Okay, thank you, Adriana. Good afternoon, good morning, as per your time zones. I am Daha Mustafa, and I'm the General Secretary of YWCA Ethiopia. I'm so happy to be part of this panel. I'm here to share my experience and learn more from fellow panelists and the participants. When I come to your questions, in general, in conflict-sensitive areas that you mentioned, women face different challenges. In those conflict-affected areas, women's disproportionately impacted by violence, displacement, lack of access to basic or essential healthcare services. This aggravates their already vulnerable health status. During the conflict, women were are at high risk of sexual and gender-based violence that includes rape, forced marriage, and other form of violence or abuse. So these traumatic experiences, as you all know, not only have immediate physical and psychological consequence, but also they result in long-term health issues like STDs, unwanted pregnancies, and most importantly, mental health disorders. In addition, as you know, when conflict is going on, the already built infrastructures, health infrastructures will be demolished. So this will limit women's access to essential reproductive healthcare services, including prenatal care, safe childbirth, family planning, and so on. So these are the contexts that women in conflict area are facing. But when I come to your specific questions, which is specific to the child marriage issue, according to many reports that I have referred, approximately 40% of girls being married before age of 18. As you know, the prevalence is high, the state is high. So this practice is particularly prevalent in rural areas, and that will be aggravated on those conflict-affected areas, such as on northern areas. I can say all over rural areas, there is tension all over the country. So on city areas are relatively safe. I quote relatively safe, but most of the young women are facing this challenge in Ethiopia that specifically women living in conflict areas. In addition to child marriage, maternal mortality rate is high, FGM issues are prevalent, especially in rural areas. That goes to the conflict-affected areas, HIV/AIDS and other STDs, limited access to reproductive health care. As you know, SRH issues, especially on conflict-affecting areas, somehow considered as a luxury. I can say, especially those residing in IDP centers, temporary shelters. They don't have access to basic SRH services. They don't have even the safety to change even their clothes. I'm sure like most of you know the context of this kind of setups. So these are the few challenges that women are facing in the conflict affecting areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dihab, for shedding light on the context in Ethiopia, specifically in conflict areas. You mentioned challenges such as the lack of access to basic health services, high risks of GBV. These are some critical challenges that women face in your region. And so thank you for shedding light on that. Now I will hand it over to Emma from Armenia. Emma, could you please tell us how does the conflict in Armenia create issues in accessing structures such as housing and healthcare, and how does that affect women specifically? Can you please unmute yourself? There you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emma from Armenian YWCA. I would like to say that I am the typical example of a woman who has lived in the conflict area. So in May, I will become 67, and half of it, I lived in a conflict area. And Armenian YWCA decided to present you the that I would like to share with you, if it is possible. Now, sorry, is it okay or not?
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry, just a minute.
No worries.
Is it okay now?
No.
No.
No,
Oh,
not yet.
no.
We're not seeing your screen yet. Have you clicked on sharing your screen?
Yeah. Let me do it again. But we tested and it was okay. Yeah, before. Is it
There
okay
you
now?
go. Yes.
Oh, yes, hope it is okay now. Sorry, please. So we wanted to let you know a brief about the history of the conflict here in our region. A brief history of the Republic of Artsakh. Why did the people of Artsakh want to have their own independent state? After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the autonomous region of Artsakh also wanted to gain independence. The road to independence was very bitter. Azerbaijan started to organize a planned genocide against Armenians living in its country and Artsakh. In 1988 to 1991, 380,000 Armenians were forcibly displaced from Azerbaijan and Armenian historical settlements. They became refugees. However, the Armenians living in Artsakh, who believed in the realization of human rights and the establishment of justice throughout the world, protested. And in 1991, observing the norms of democracy, they established the Republic of Artsakh through a referendum of national self-determination. But after that, in September 2020, Azerbaijan started a war against the Republic of Artsakh with the support of Turkey. The war lasted 44 days. Thousands died and thousands were forcibly displaced. As a result of the war, Azerbaijan occupied most of the territory of Artsakh. Then, 9 months from December 2022 to September 2023, Azerbaijan and its allies kept 120,000 Artsakh Armenians under blockade, subjecting them to hunger and psychological pressure. Through war in September 2023, together with its allies, Azerbaijan used all means of aggression, as a result of which Artsakh was deprived of its indigenous people and the created democratic state. Today, we have many deaths, including women, children, elderly people, about 120,000 Armenians who were deported, hundreds of prisoners kept in Azeri prisons, leaders of the Republic of Artsakh, again, kept there, businessmen and philanthropists. So just a few photos, and you can see as a result of forced displacement by Azerbaijan in September 2023, the Armenians left their historical homeland, the Republic of Artsakh. And so just pictures you can see that testify all these. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm so excited that even can't speak properly. You see how they flee from their homeland. You see the buildings that it is impossible to live in there. So now about Armenian National YWCA. We tried to do our best to carry out basic activities in the Noyamberian borderline community. And we have, as a result, 156 families and 530 persons forcibly displaced from Artsakh. And we have these people registered in our region, in Noyamberian. So 260 of them are women and girls. 85 of them are under 18 and 215 are over 18. And the Armenian National YWCA tries to show its support to the women, girls, and children affected by the conflict, forcibly displaced from Artsakh. We had a project, 360 days, a Women's Rights Protection Day, and we implemented the program with the support of the Women's Fund in Armenia. We involved women and girls forcibly displaced from Artsakh. You see them in these pictures. And we organized self-care and mental health initiative for them. And we made handmade soaps together with them. You see, they lost everything. They lost even the environment, just the people who they can open their hearts to. And they all need our support. So this initiative was supported by European YWCA with financial assistance from YWCA Ireland. Thanks them a lot. And we are grateful for their humanitarian step. And that's all. The other are pictures just, So sorry if I
no worries. Unfortunately,
used a lot of your time.
No, it's just being mindful of time, but thank you for shedding insight on Armenia, which has such a complex and intricate history, especially with the Azerbaijan aggression. And thank you for explaining also more about the displacement and all of its consequences, specifically on women and girls. And it was really nice to see about YWCA Armenia's activities, the soaps and all. And I hope we get to discuss a bit more about this throughout our conversation. So now we have Sophia with us from the International Federation of the Red Cross. And Sophia, I know you won't be shedding insight on a specific region, but you will be giving us answers from a humanitarian perspective. And so I'm going to give you the floor to introduce yourself, but also could you tell us, as a mental health and psychosocial support for the IFRC, could you tell us about the specific humanitarian needs that arise during times of conflict that women may face?
Sure, Adriana. Thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone attending, wherever you are in the world. So, as mentioned, my name is Sofia Ribeiro. I am the Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Officer for the IFRC. I'm based in Geneva. Just as a bit of a context, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies is a membership organization. So we represent and we support 191 national societies, Red Cross, Red Crescent national societies from across the world. And it's an organization with a very strong volunteer base, at the moment counted at about 14 million volunteers across the world. And mental health and psychosocial support is one of the areas that we focus on and that we support our membership, both through operational support, but also through our psychosocial reference center that I'm imagining might be familiar to some of you, but I'll be happy also to leave the link so that you can actually go there and look at some of the resources that are available. And basically, our IFRC reference center for psychosocial support is dedicated to the development of tools, manuals, guidelines, and trainings specifically. I will actually be sharing a little bit of that later today. I hope there will be space for that. But let me then focus a little bit on mental health effects of living in conflict. And let me bring you a little bit of the statistics, because I think it's always important to just, have a little bit of background and what is science telling us. So the World Health Organization tells us that approximately 1 in every 5 individuals who have experienced living in a conflict-affected area will at some point in life develop a mental health condition, with the most commonly being depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. These are general numbers. They're not specific for women. We know also that from these numbers, 13% or around 13% will develop mild disorders, 4% moderate disorders, and 5.1% will develop what we call severe mental health conditions, which is usually already a chronic mental health condition that requires treatment, usually for life. So with this said, we do know that obviously conflict has a direct and even indirect impact on the mental health and well-being of individuals who experience. I think our previous speakers have already alluded to that. What is particular for women, and let me now focus a little bit on that, is that the mere fact of being a woman is in itself a vulnerability factor. So obviously, in terms of mental health, we look heavily into what are protective factors, what are vulnerability factors. And indeed, being a woman just increases the risk for developing mental health conditions. And there is some research that actually points out into a higher percentage of mental health conditions being diagnosed within women when compared to men. This is linked to, different factors. Of course, one of the biggest ones is gender-based violence that is generated during conflicts. I think our colleagues mentioned about that, particularly Lana, Debab, they mentioned some of the ways in which this affects women directly. But there are other aspects. Women who are faced with war, they may come across, new challenges that were not there before conflict, such as, for example, being responsible for caring for their families and turning into being the main provider, sometimes becoming widows, sometimes not knowing about the whereabouts of their husbands, or having their husbands in the front line. So obviously all of this affects their capacity to cope, their capacity to even take care of others. And very often that makes them disregard themselves. This duty of care towards others just somehow generates this disengagement about yourself. And very often we do hear kind of a sense of feeling like they're selfish if they take care of themselves. But yeah, that's something that would need a little bit more diving. Maybe we will have the chance to do that. But just also to mention that, discrimination, marginalization may also increase in terms of conflict, aspects such as restrictions to mobility, to education, to employment opportunities, limited access to resources, and very much, I would stress, limited access to decision-making processes. And I think there's unfortunately many conflicts going on around the world. We all, I think, connect to some of these examples from different places. But yes, these are just some examples. I think some of the panelists mentioned a few others, and I think the point raised on the intersectionality is one that is very important, because it just couples the different dimensions of challenges that women are faced with and that can impact severely their mental health.
Thank you so much, Sophia. You kind of connected so many dots from Lonnie, Dehab's, and Emma's presentations. And I think it's so critical that you mentioned that being a woman, just the simple fact of being a woman makes them even that more vulnerable. And there's this image that came to my mind when you said that I once saw. It's this picture of a fish, a mother fish and her baby fish, and they're out of water. And so the mother fish is crying so that that water is saving her child. And I think that that image represents so well that reality that you're talking about. So now, just being mindful of time again, I want to thank all of our speakers for introducing themselves and presenting the unique context of their regions. Now we're going to take 5 minutes to answer a quick poll. I'm going to ask Talisa to share this poll on the screen. So for users on Zoom, you should see a little pop-up window on your screen right now. And please, we value your participation. So put in your answers. I love the support that's going on in the chat box. I invite you speakers to just take a quick peek because there are lots of people supporting each of you and shouting out the regions and shouting out you, Sophia. I think this is so great. There's so much participation happening in the panel. Okay, great. The poll is now closed, and I believe everyone should be seeing the results popping up on their screen. If you quickly want to review, 55%. And I'm actually going to ask Talisa to go over this just so I don't butcher this, if that's okay.
No, absolutely. Let me just get on the right side of the screen. So thank you so much for everyone to answering the poll. Just a quick result, and there was multiple options on this answer. The first one at 50% that people in second position is access to healthcare services that people selected the majority. The second with only 36% is mental health issues, the result we received. 38% for maternal health and reproductive rights. 40% for nutrition and food security, and the final one, that's the first position, the most answered one, was safety from gender-based violence. Quite interesting to see, because obviously all have the direct impact of women, but to understand that the most worrying fact is gender-based violence. Up to you, back to you, Adriana.
Thanks so much, Talisa. And thank you to everyone for answering the poll. Now we will continue with the panel discussions. So we've heard from our panelists about the disastrous impacts of conflict on health and the challenges that women face as a consequence, and also how severely their well-being can be compromised. But now we will elaborate more on these health impacts, specifically on their sexual health, mental health, and well-being, as well as the difficulties that they face in addressing and those difficulties that they face in accessing basic health care services. So I'm actually going to start with you, Sophia. And thanks for your insights earlier, mentioning a plethora of different effects and consequences that arise from conflict. But could you tell us a bit more about what the immediate needs to support women, young women, and girls in conflict areas are?
Thank you, Adriana. I think the pool says it a little bit, no? In this, I mean, from a mental health perspective, what we do have in mind is that mental health is affected by whatever is happening around you. So obviously, if you don't have access to healthcare, you're not doing well. You're worried about yourself. You're worried that you may not be there to provide to everyone else. And then, of course, you are worried about your own safety, right? So all of that somehow affects mental health. So I was just reflecting on that when I looked at the pool. But I think what needs to be understood is that addressing mental health needs requires really a comprehensive approach. And that needs to, incorporate a few elements. I would just like to highlight 3 of them from, what could be a much longer list. But first of all, protection and empowerment of women. I think everyone here attending will understand why. And again, we did see that gender-based violence was one of the main worries that people attending this webinar highlighted. Then, of course, there needs to be access to mental health and psychosocial support services. This is still taken as a kind of a nice-to-be sector. So not always duly prioritized, but it is important because it's the kind of scars that they are not really visible, but they exist. They remain very often for long periods. So this needs to be addressed as well, not as a luxury, but as something that everyone has the right to have access to. And then, of course, it's also important to address the root causes of gender-based violence and discrimination in conflict settings. But in addition to that, I also wanted to maybe go back to something that Lani mentioned in the beginning, how she mentioned from her experience about how women would be seen as victims, right? And this for mental health is really important because it's really important to look at the people that you care for, not from their place of weaknesses, but from their place of strength. That really needs to be the starting point, right? So it's important to, first of all, build on women's existing strengths rather than looking at them as if whatever has happened to them would define them. So let's, just take sexual violence as an example. That's something that happened to the person. That's not the person, right? And sometimes when we just address the person from the perspective of what happens to them, we really miss, all of the components of strength and the whole of the person, and we somehow contribute to stigmatizing this person, right? So even beyond that, we hear a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, it's almost a buzzword when we talk about conflict and so on. But what we do know is that people are incredibly resilient. I would say women in particular. So while we will see a lot of, some statistics coming towards us, it's also important to say that not always they reflect like the cultural understanding of the people that they access. So they might actually overrepresent the results. And it's really important to always keep in mind, what are the strengths of this person before you start looking at the trauma and the impact of trauma on people. So mental health and psychosocial interventions, they really need to integrate the knowledge and the capacity capital of women, I mean, in multiple forms, rather than looking at them as like passive recipients of, some form of support, be it mental health or any other. In addition, I would also add that it's really important to look at the woman as a whole. And I mean, women are a world, we know that, right? So, we are the daughters, we are the mothers, we are the work colleague, the friend, the sister. And it's really important that when mental health and psychosocial support programs are being developed for women, they really look at all of these elements. Otherwise, we may lose something. So I'll just leave you with 2 examples. For example, incorporating some elements on dealing with children's anxiety, explaining them, in appropriate ways, what is conflict, know how to reassure them, know how to interpret the ways in which they display emotional suffering. might be really invaluable information for a mother that is overwhelmed with so much happening at the same time, and that can really help them in that role as a mother. But this said, we also need to look at the woman, no? So it definitely needs to include, self-care tips, self-awareness, psychological literacy, so that we can understand ourselves, know what are our triggers, our red flags, so to speak, on a mental health perspective, and particularly allow women to acknowledge that it's okay to take care of themselves, and actually that for them to be okay to take care of others, they need to be okay first. So we really need to take away that that kind of heaviness that they have on maybe taking 1 hour to themselves, and really put that in another way, in a way where they understand that the better they are, the best they will be for everyone else that they're taking care of. So just to conclude, I think it's also important to always have in mind that anything needs to reinforce their agency, their capacity to contribute, give them opportunities to contribute, and to really be proactive in whatever it is that is going on around them, and that they can somehow contribute to being okay with themselves, but also with the context and whatever else that is happening.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for sharing that and for mentioning, again, such critical points. And there's so much insight in that. And I really feel like we could keep on talking about this for hours. Thank you, Danny, for highlighting something that Sophia said about looking at women not from their weaknesses, but from their strengths. And there's so much power in that. And I feel like that sets the path for healing, especially when there's all of that those post-traumatic effects going on. And it seems like there's also a lot of mindset work that has to be done from the people providing the care and providing the support. And that's a very critical point. But as you were talking, I was thinking about how these immediate needs are even more exacerbated, especially in regions where there's a total collapse of infrastructures and basic health services. And this makes me think about where I am now, my home country, which is Haiti. And as you may know, since 2021, there has been this drastic increase in violence in Haiti, specifically gang violence. And this has resulted from a very complicated situation, especially in the capital of Port-au-Prince, where gangs control most of the city and violence is pervasive. And so this has led to this complete collapse of the state, and matched with the soaring poverty. So you have hundreds of thousands of people that have been displaced, and that breakdown of institutions exacerbates these needs. And it's a whole debate on how to provide them with basic primary healthcare services, among many other immediate needs that they may have. So I'm actually going to use this as a segue to Lonnie, because I feel like Latin America and the Caribbean share so much, especially in terms of conflict. So Lonnie, could you please share with us your thoughts on how the dynamics of armed conflict, particularly involving gangs, impact the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women and girls?
Yes, Adriana, and I want to reinforce that issue you mentioned, that we are so similar, and yet, and I say also coming this from both practical oriented but theoretical work I do. Many times when we talk about Latin America and the Caribbean, people think we don't have conflicts per se, because we have that vision of conflict that it's persistent war, a humanitarian big crisis, but we also in Latin America face something that we call also the everyday violence. So women especially, are resisting every day in different forms. That it might not be an armed conflict per se, but it's still a violent dynamic. And in that term, I want to also to talk about how also all these violences, as in the poll we can see, are connected, because especially in our work, we do a lot of collaboration with female activists. So when Sophia was talking about mental health one of the issues we have with these activists is that they are constantly threatened both by drug gangs or by the government, so by the military. So this violence comes from a multi-directional phase. Sometimes they don't know who is the person threatening them. So that creates also some psychological issues in what they do. And I mention this because all these activists are usually females who are defending sexual and gender-based violence or sexual and reproductive rights. So they face already this psychological violence, but also when it comes to their work itself, something very concrete is, well, as we have this multi-directional violence, women usually face, as I said, sexual violence like rapes, different types of violations, and this happens in different circumstances. So in Central America, for example, as we have the migration corridors, that's where most of the times women are facing sexual violence. So we need to talk about protection. How do we protect this right of migration, but also the sexual and reproductive rights? Also, I can talk about young women in Central America and in South America. Especially want to mention one case. So, for example, in Honduras, well, there's the first female president. That was a big news when this president came, and there was a lot of expectations. Fortunately, now the emergency contraceptive pill was approved. However, there was the intention to have a law to protect young female and bring them more sexual education, and that was vetoed by other groups who are against this type of rights. So we can see that also education, when we talk about sexual and reproductive rights, is really important. We have many organizations who I work with. We push for sexual educations in schools, and also with faith-based actors who we also tend to be sometimes pretty close when it comes to sexual and reproductive rights. So we have worked with with these different types of actors, education, religious, and there is some progress, but what we have to think about, how do we protect these people who are acting for this, who are pushing and who are advocating for these agendas. But mainly, I think that when we talk about sexual and reproductive rights, we have to think that different circumstances where this sexual violence is persistent, how can we engage in dialogue so that we retake the importance of young women embracing sexual education, about taking agency on their bodies. And finally, I want to address that in any process we take, and with all the different types of mental and physical health issues for women, we have to ensure participation, that these young women or that these women are leaders of this process, that is not our organization, but also the people who have these situations are the leaders, the agents, and that they are the collaborators of this process. Because otherwise, we could be willing to change the world, but if we don't take into account the real needs, then we are doing nothing.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Lonnie, sorry, for sharing all of that. And I relate so much to what you're saying. Like you said, we tend to think that in Latin America and Caribbean, there's not much conflict, but conflict comes in different sizes, shapes, and forms. And there's a lot to be said about gang violence and its consequences, especially on psychological health and physical health. I know that the impacts are so wide, and like you said, it stems from multi-directional threats. Just the idea of walking from home to school and fearing that you'll be attacked by a gang member is already something of its own. So, and also thanks for mentioning about the protection of activists. This is something that we tend to put on the side, but it's just as important. So thank you. And now I'm going to hand the mic to Dihab. So we know that since 2020, there's been an eruption of violence, again, specifically in the northernmost part of Ethiopia. And in the context of this ongoing conflict, Could you tell us about how gender-based violence affect women's ability to access sexual and reproductive health services in these conflict-affected areas? And also, what measures do you think can be taken to address this?
Okay, thank you, Adriana. I just want to compliment on the things that my colleagues have mentioned. I strongly believe that addressing the SRE service challenge requires a holistic approach, as this challenge have an impact on education, health, gender equality, be it the socio-economic aspect, the leadership capacities. So I believe that addressing these SRE services require a multifaceted approach. As that it has been mentioning, GBV has a profound impact on women's ability to access SRH services and rights, of course. Women who experience GBV often or mostly face barriers to access SRH services, as that include prenatal care, safe childbirth, family planning, and even post-rape care. As you know, the issue of GBV is I can say not reported issue, let alone in let alone in conflict affected areas. In the country, I can speak in for my country. The GBV cases are very or rarely reported to justice offices and other sectors. So the fear of stigma, discrimination, and reprisal can prevent these survivors of GBV from seeking the necessary healthcare services, leading to that I believe that leads to serious health consequences. So to address the impact of GBV on women's SRH services, I compiled the several measures into just 4 or 5. The first thing that I believe should be done is strengthening healthcare systems, investing in healthcare infrastructures and services in those conflict-affected areas is really essential to ensure that women have better access to quality SRH. This action might include capacity support for healthcare providers to provide gender-sensitive and comprehensive care for survivors of GBV. The second measure that I believe should be done is promoting awareness and education. As I have mentioned earlier, the idea of the issue of SRH is a taboo. It's a no talk area. So if we broaden our community outreach, awareness campaigns on the importance of SRH services, and awareing the community the rights they have regarding to the SRH, this, I believe that it can help us to reduce the stigma around GBV and encourage the women to seek care on due time. The third measure that I would like to recommend is establishing safe spaces on community level, on IDP centers, on temporary shelters, and so on. So creating a safe space where women can seek support, counseling, and even medical care without fear or judgment is crucial in addressing the impact of GBV on women's access to SRH. The fourth one that I would like to recommend is empowering women and girls. It has been saying that women and girls can do it well. So promoting women's empowerment through economic opportunities. Initially, I have been mentioned this challenge has a holistic nature, and to address this challenge, we need to empower or invest on the economic opportunities, education, even the leadership capacities of young women, of women and girls. And this, I believe, help us to reduce the vulnerability to GBV and improve their ability to access the SRH services. The last one I would like to recommend is strengthening the legal framework and accountability mechanism, and even strengthening the reporting system through on community level, national level. So enforcing laws that protect women's rights, including laws against GBV, holding perpetrators accountable, for their actions are critical steps in addressing the root of cause of violence against women. I'm rushing because I know that I'm I'm using extra time. So strengthening the reporting mechanism on community level is important, and introducing those reporting mechanism to community members, to women in conflict affecting areas is important. So by implementing the above measures and prioritizing the needs of women in conflict affecting areas, we can work towards ensuring that all women in conflict affected areas have better access to SRH services and rights, and free from GBV and discrimination. Thank you so much, Adriana, and sorry if I take more time.
No worries. Thank you, Dihab. And thank you for mentioning that addressing all of these issues is a multifaceted approach. And all the measures that you presented, I think, fit perfectly with that simple phrase that you mentioned, that it's a multifaceted approach. I just want to mention that the last point you mentioned about strengthening legal frameworks and reporting system goes hand in hand with what Sophia was saying earlier about the reporting having to go beyond the numbers, because numbers tend to overgeneralize situations, especially in terms of conflict. And there's also the cultural narrative behind it. And yeah, that's something to keep in mind. So I'm not going to take up more of our time. Now I'm going to hand it over to Emma. And Emma, we value your perspective on the mental health impacts experienced by women and girls in Armenia. And so could you tell us about how does displacement due to conflict specifically affect the mental health of women and girls, and what resources, support systems created by YWCA Armenia are crucial for addressing their mental health needs? You need to unmute yourself. Okay, there you go.
Again. Now, thank you very much. It's very important to realize that the government itself can't solve all the problems of the refugees. So NGOs' involvement is very crucial in this aspect. And Armenian YWCA tried to do their best to help the refugees, the displaced women and girls, to integrate them and with the local society. So we, thanks to Taiwan YWCA, we have a safe space in our YWCA office, yeah, and it is on the ground floor, so it is used both as a bomb shelter and an active meeting place for our women and girls. And in this safe area, we have beneficiaries as young women and girls forcibly displaced from Artsakh in Noemberian community, and 55 local families which were affected by the war. We have 30 girls and women of 32 displaced Artsakh families and 45 children who were directly involved in the program. And also we implemented a safe environment, protected adolescent, which aimed to contribute to the improvement of the leadership abilities of 10 Artsakh refugees and 10 local adolescent girls in a conflict situation, to raise awareness about the SR, HR, and mental health and relation to age characteristics. And again, we did this with the support of Women's Fund in Armenia and the Women's Resource Center, NGO. So within this framework, we implemented Informed Woman is Protected program. The goals were to unify the representatives of the structures operating in the field of SRHR and mental health in Noemberian city in order to create an informational platform necessary for raising the awareness of adolescent girls and women of more risky groups in a crisis situation. To raise the level of awareness of women and refugee girls in the field of SRHR and mental health by providing new methods of knowledge and necessary information. And again, with our partner organizations. So once again, I would like to mention that Armenian National YWCA implemented the Women Are Strong Together program. The goal was to contribute to strengthening the capacities of 19 settlements of the community directly affected by the 44-day Artsakh War of 2020. Local and forcibly displaced girls and women age 18 to 30 to support their social and psychological integration, and to contribute to the improvement of their rights empowerment through YWCA safe space. As I mentioned, we had already this safe space on non-formal education, formation of women's self-help groups in 19 settlements of the region, and provision of vocational skills. And as a result of this, 531 girls and women directly participated in the program. And so we have implemented together or in cooperation with Transcendental Meditation Center in Armenia and coordinated the activities of organizing a course on meditation in the Noemberian community, contributed to the involvement of women affected by the war. And 5 members of the Armenian National YWCA participated in the meditation courses in the safe area together with the beneficiaries.
Thank you so much, Emma, for sharing about the work of YWCA Armenia and the various support systems that you have put in place to support women, especially safe spaces, the Women Are Strong program, and the course on meditation, which I find to be such a great support system. So now we're going to take a quick break, I believe, to watch a 5-minute segment of a documentary done by the World YWCA for the opening of Geneva Peace Week in 2023. So Talisa, you may play the video.
What advice would you give young girls, women, and fellow peace builders?
We should have awareness about all the challenges and the injustice that is happening in Iraq. Also, I really encourage young people, especially young ladies, to educate themselves when it comes to their rights. If we educate ourselves about our rights, then we can advocate for it. If we advocate for it, we can make change.
I advise young women not to be afraid, to be strong, to make their voices heard, and to insist on being on the table.
Them is one, they should educate themselves. You need to start by gaining a solid understanding of peace. They are supposed to build skills. And then the other point is you need to seek mentorship. You cannot say, I know everything. You're supposed to be guided on the right things that a peace builder is supposed to what? To obtain. You need to also network. You are supposed to collaborate and learn more Learn more skills. You need to volunteer in bringing peace in your country. You're supposed to advocate for gender equality. A peace builder does not support one gender.
Thank you, Talisa. So this was really just a short segment of the documentary, but I invite you all to go on the World YWCA website, on the World YWCA YouTube page as well to see the full documentary. It's a must watch. There are so many powerful messages that come out of that documentary. And I think Talisa or Danny will also put the link in the chat box for your convenience. So now we're going to continue with our discussions, and we've heard so much about the context and the realities in Armenia, in Ethiopia, in Latin America, and also in Haiti, as well as the various immediate needs from a humanitarian perspective that women have in conflict areas. So although so much has been happening in our countries, there's also so much that has been done to make changes and fight for the changes that we want. So now I'm going to ask all of our speakers to describe a specific project, initiative, or collaboration that you've participated in that successfully contributed to peace and justice or supported women in conflict situation. And we're going to start with you, Lani. So you have the mic.
Thanks, Adrian. So, as I mentioned before, despite, for example, in Honduras, we have this critical situation with the activists talking about sexual and gender and human rights. Something that has been really interesting for me with this hybrid position, like being from Latin America, now working in Europe and working back to my region, has been how among international and local organizations can support and visibilize what women are facing, but also ways to overcome those challenges. So with this case in Honduras, as I mentioned, we were really concerned about these laws, veto for different laws against sexual education. So what we did here in Sweden was to work with our advocacy team. So we work with parliamentarians here in Sweden, and these Swedish parliamentarians not only visited Honduras, but also they wrote a letter for the government in Honduras talking about the importance of women, sexual rights. And I thought that that was a really interesting collaboration, because then our women working in Honduras, advocating for these rights, were the ones pushing for us to do something, to do some advocacy here in Sweden. And then that has been something really remarkable. Last year we did. These letters were sent. There has been also that now in the Swedish government, this case and another case in Guatemala has raised the need to have a parliamentarians group for Latin America. So I think that these are milestones that you shouldn't be taken little. Like there has been huge things. And also to highlight again, as Sophia said, not only to victimize ourselves, but see that women are agents. For me, especially with the female groups in Latin America and the Caribbean, what I can see is this sorority. Despite all the challenges, despite the violence that we're living, there's networks. There are networks from women in civil society helping each other, supporting each other mentally, advocating for each other, and that's something we as women have as a I think it's part of our nature to look for these relationships, and these relationships at the small scale and the global scale help a lot when we are advocating for a better health for all the women wherever we are.
Thank you, Lani. So we only have a little under 20 minutes left. So I will ask our speakers to please make it stay between 3 minutes. But thank you, Lani, for sharing the remarkable work and for mentioning networks. I think it is definitely an inherent strength of women. So now I'm going to hand it over to you, Dihab, to share with us one initiative or project that you've been able to collaborate on.
Thank you, Adriana. Sharing our projects within just 3 minutes is a bit difficult, but I will try my best to do so. As you know, like YWCA Ethiopia is not a humanitarian or organization. But the conflicts, the past three or 4 years helped us to learn more, to explore more on such area. Since the operational areas that we have been implementing projects were affected by conflicts. That's why we somehow adjust ourselves, review our strategic objectives, and learn a bit more. So for the past 4 or more years, YWCA Ethiopia had many initiatives that contribute to peace and justice, but I will try to mention a few here. The first one is establishing safe spaces on IDP centers. As I have mentioned on the challenge part, accessing safe space is a challenge, and most women in conflict-affected areas are being challenged to do so. So while doing this, we try to understand the unique needs of women. I think Sophia mentioned this important issue, important concept, that is intersectionality. When we say women have different women with disabilities, young women, children, and so on. So while we offer safe spaces, we try to understand the unique needs of those intersectional women needs. We have been engaging in different advocacy activities, advocacy initiatives on national, regional, and even on international levels. We facilitated a platform for policy review. As you know, the GBV policy in Ethiopia is on progress of approval. And we have facilitated consultations for young women and girls to contribute to that policy. The same goes to youth policy, transitional justice policy. Young women and girls got a chance to review the draft one and contribute to that one. We had organized sensitization workshops, community dialogues to create awareness for community members. We have provided different capacity development initiatives, trainings on conflict resolutions, violence prevention, and so on. We also nominated or capacitated peace agents, women peace agents or champions, to speak for or advocating for women on those conflict affecting areas. We also mobilized a resource from volunteers. As you know, YWCA movement is a volunteers movement. So our volunteers mobilize resources to support women in IDP centers. We provided reusable sanitary pads soaps and other SRH related services. We also supported kids residing in those temporary shelters with food items, clothing, and so on. So as YWCA Ethiopia, we have been doing an amazing job in supporting women and children in conflict affecting areas, but still we are learning since we are just started to implement or support such programs. Thank you so much, Adriana. Excuse me again.
Thank you.
There's too much to share, but
I know.
Thank
you for sharing about the safe spaces, your advocacy work, as well as resource mobilizing. Now I'm going to hand it over to you, Emma, to quickly share. I know you've already shared about what YWCA Armenia has done, but if there is one last thing you would like to share with everyone, you have a few minutes to do so.
Thank you, Adriana. Maybe I would like to mention that we women, girls, and young girls do a lot in our communities. But as you see, we have still places in the world where we see now that conflicts still exist, and we have to be united. We can join our efforts. I don't know. I just remembered. I just remembered now. Beatles. Imagine, yeah. Imagine one day all the women and on the planet join together and give up all their important or not so important work and just stop working, stop studying, stop doing their job, and go out in the streets and demand from all the governments to stop all these conflicts and wars in all the corners of the planet. Because half of my life I spent in a conflict area, and Noyamberian, where Armenian YWCA, National YWCA office is situated, is just 1 kilometer away from the borderline. And we suffered a lot, and we know how women, girls and young girls suffer a lot from these conflict situations. So just let's be united, let's be together, let's help each other, assist each other, whatever we can. That's what I would like.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. And I always say that if one of us is affected, then all of us are affected. And so we do need to join our efforts together to make change.
Thank you all. Thank you.
And now on to our last speaker for today, Sophia. More specifically for you, I would like to ask you, what can women do in regions of conflict to find resources and coping mechanisms for their mental health and well-being?
Thank you, Adriana. I will try to be short. I know we are a little bit tight on time. First of all, I would like to start by saying that the colleagues have mentioned, so many beautiful examples of initiatives going out there. So I think one of the first things that women can do is really to look at what is available in their areas, because there are incredibly beautiful, insightful, and meaningful work being done. I think Emma shared a little bit, for example, on something that is very specific on mental health, and also something that Lani mentioned, how networks of women also naturally come together and are built up. So that in itself, are things that women can definitely do. But I wanted to share two specific resources from the IFRC, but before that, I just wanted to say that strictly from a psychological point of view, the only thing that we can fully control is ourselves. And I know it doesn't feel like that often, but it is. When a lot of things are going on and we really fall short on wanting to control or change the circumstances, acceptance is in a way, a way to relieve you a little bit from the distress as well. And indeed, your thoughts, your emotions, your mind is something that you can somehow train to control, right? So I'm going to focus a little bit more on that. And the first thing I wanted to introduce to you is a booklet called The Wellbeing Guide. I'm going to put the link to it. It's a resource from the I4C PS Center, and it is accessible in 6 languages. It does include French, Arabic. I'm afraid it doesn't include Spanish yet, but we keep on adding new translations. And basically this booklet, it was originally done to address humanitarian workers, but you will see it applies to everyone. It actually uses, exercises that psychologists somewhat prescribe and work with the people that they support, and are things that people can easily do at home. And I mean, if I just open here one of the pages, it says something around when feeling overwhelmed and distressed, and it gives you tips, what can you do. So this is, something that is really something very pragmatic. People can download it and have it at home and look at it. There's also some tips, if you're facing difficulties in sleeping, which is something that is also very common when you're going through a lot and there's concerns about your safety and so on. So there's different tips that you can look from there. Another thing that I'm going to invite you to look at is a psychological first aid e-learning course that we launched just quite recently. It is for now only available in English, but we plan on having it available in other languages. And it is open source. It is at the IFRC learning platform. I will also leave on the chat the link for that. And basically, it does contain a lot of self-care tips throughout. So it will either help you on, learning a little bit on what is psychological first aid and maybe addressing others' distress with a lot of case examples that can enable people to understand what it means. But it has also throughout a lot of self-care tips that are more towards, ourselves and what is it that we can do to support ourselves. But finally, really just to say that it's important that women look at what might be available in their regions. In some places there will be hotlines, helplines that will be available that are usually offer confidentiality and offer specialized services as well. So it's very important to look for what is out there, to look for resources that maybe are downloadable, like these examples that I just gave you. And obviously also always rely on your networks. Having a strong network is a protective factor for mental health. So don't keep it to yourselves, look for this person that you really trust, being a family member, a religious leader, a very close friend. Do reach out for help, because I think, as Adriana said, if one is affected, everyone is affected. So it is within this space of collaboration and support that we will also support in healing each other.
Thank you so much, Sophia. I invite you all to click on the link that Sophia will share. I think it's a great resource, and I look forward to downloading it myself. Now we have reached the end of our panel, unfortunately. I think we had an amazing conversation, and I wish it could go on longer. And I hope everyone watching today has had a great time. This conversation has been filled with so much insightful information and key takeaways, and I'm definitely going to take a lot of this as food for thought and carry on with some reflections today. I think now in this day and age, we live in a world where conflict seems to be everywhere. And although it may manifest in different shapes and forms, the outcome is always the same, as we've heard today. And women and girls suffer the worst consequences, always. So it's even more important to bring awareness on these realities and the impact of conflict on women's health and mental health. And it's important to talk about it, especially in spaces like these through the Bullet and Dove initiative. So this isn't the only panel in the series. There are 3 more that have been posted on the World YWCA website, and I highly encourage you to check them out. There are also podcasts. There's the full length of the documentary that we saw a segment of today, and there are also infographics. Talisa will be putting down the links in the chat, so make sure that you quickly click on them so that you don't lose them once this panel is officially over. And finally, on behalf of the World YWCA, a huge thank you to our amazing and brilliant speakers, Lani, Dihab, Emma, and Sophia. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for opening up and sharing both knowledge and experience. It's not always easy to talk about these difficult realities, especially when we are on the field. So thank you for your courage, for your work, for your contributions to the movement and to the world. And thank you for your leadership. I also want to say a big thank you to our interpreters who are behind the scenes and have been doing a tremendous work of translating in both French and Spanish. You have made this space just that much more inclusive. So thank you. And lastly, thank you to everyone who has joined us today from wherever you are in the world, connecting from various time zones. We truly hope you had an enriching time. So stay tuned to the World YWCA social media and keep an eye out on the mailing for future Bullet and Dove panels. Now I officially close this panel, and we made it right on time.